Hello and welcome back to Storytime with Mary's Child Development Series with Hearts and Minds Aloud's Baba Dazi. Hello Baba, how are you?
I'm very well, Mary. How are you?
I'm doing really, really well, thank you. And, as the lockdown is now slowly lifting, children are going back to school. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and how you think children are going to cope after being at home for so many months.
Thank you, Mary. Restrictions easing is also a different stage of this entire experience with the pandemic, and they might require a little bit of adjustment from parents and then from children as well. We know that emotionally and mentally, children have experienced this, similar fears and anxieties as adults have, as their parents have, once they've understood the nature of the disease, and also recognizing and observing all the changes that have gone on, right? With the lockdown and also with the change of routine, we know that children have also lost a sense of structure and a sense of simulation, which they usually have on ordinary days when they're going to school and, hanging out with their friends and learning as they did before the lockdown. But in certain homes, children may have also been exposed to interpersonal conflicts, right? In homes where there have been lots of maybe arguments and, maybe even violence from parents. And some children may have gone through this sort of, they may have experienced some of the violence as well. So emotionally and mentally, they've, this entire pandemic and the experience has taken its toll on children as well. Somehow, I'm sure they've managed to build resilience while they've been home. Okay, and when we're talking about the emotional effect, we also know that we need to consider the possible post-traumatic effects of COVID-19 and the entire experience on children. But with the restrictions easing and with children going back, we would want to do what's in the best interest of the child. Okay, depending on how well adjusted, how ready the child is to, face the world, for want of a better expression. Because they've been taught to shield and to, stay at home, which has become the safe space away from Corona and all of its ills. So we want to measure the child's readiness, and then following that, we know what to do in their best interest.
Perfect. Thank you, Barbara. So obviously now with children returning to school, there are going to be social distancing protocols at schools that young children have to observe. And, with very young children, I can imagine that must be quite hard for them to socially distance from their friends that they're so used to playing with. So how can parents help to ease children into this and help them to play with their friends with these new rules in mind?
Mm-hmm. So if we're being honest, there's no easy answer to this question, because at some point you would feel like, whatever you're doing is a bit of a trial and error. You want to see what works best for the child. But yes, I believe that open communication is invaluable in all of this. The child would always have questions, and you want to be available and ready and, able to address those questions so that it alleviates most of, if not all of, their fears. Okay, you want to also be honest with the information that you are giving to them. Okay, so you explain what is happening, but you highlight the positive as well. And talking about the positive might be you highlighting or focusing on recovery rates, for example. And you want to be consistent with the information that you are giving them, okay, so that you are not creating more confusion and giving them that information. So these are a few things that parents can do to help children ease their way back into the new routine.
Perfect. So my own children, they are 2 and 4. They're actually going back to school. We made the decision to send them back to school just a couple of days a week. They go to a preschool, so it's quite small. Okay. And one of the things that they're going to have to deal with is being in a bubble. A bubble means they're only allowed to play with 2 or 3 friends at all. And so they're going to be in groups with them and their teacher and the small group of friends. In your opinion, how do we help children to understand this new normal, this new situation that they've been thrust into?
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing how that works with the bubble and, how that arrangement works. Like I mentioned earlier, whatever decision that we take should be in the best interest of the child, right? And also, I guess it's a function of what the school is able to provide. Now, I believe that this is clearly a way of making sure that there is less physical interaction between children who will have a harder time, restricting contact with their other friends, no matter how, dire or how important it is to stay away. So like I've already mentioned, explaining and communicating is important. Maybe it could be helpful to act out or simulate some of the reasons why social distancing and hand washing and all of these things are important, because of course we all know that hand washing, for example, is part of hygiene, and post-corona it will still be important. So you also want to speak to children about this and explain it to them, and also demonstrate, if you have the opportunity, why these things are important. And over time, I believe that the message will be carried across to them.
I completely agree with that. Personally, I called the school ahead of the children going back to make sure that, firstly, Chloe was in the same group as her best friend, because also these relationships formed at a young age are really important. Absolutely. But also just to understand what the protocols are and to make sure that I was comfortable with it. So, I mean, I think, to your point, parents need to obviously take control. Okay. Yeah. So, Baba, I know that not everybody is ready to send their children back to school. My children's preschool has been open for a whole month, and I decided to wait to make sure that everything was okay and nobody was sick, and I was comfortable with the way that they were handling the protocols before I decided that it was okay for me to send my children back to school. But how do we tell if children are actually ready to go back as well? Because they've been at home for so long and they're probably scared.
Of course. It's expected that they would be scared. So a big part of knowing would be from the observation that you've done of your child, and, how their temperaments and their behaviors have been maintained or evolved during the lockdown period. So for some children, the isolation might have resulted in them becoming restless and, irritable, maybe exhibiting a bit of anger and being demanding and all of those things. So you want to measure, right, how much of that you are seeing. If the isolation is what is creating that, you might want to encourage that they start benefiting from social interaction. And I believe that while the school is open, because everybody understands what the situation is, teachers would want to be or schools would want to be flexible as well. So some schools might want to stagger open and closing times. And I believe that they would also understand that once you've brought your child to school, for example, they are not doing so well on the first day, you want to be able to, take them out much earlier than other people who are adjusting fairly well, so that you slowly ease them into that schedule instead of throwing them in a deep end. Okay, so there's a lot of observation and then testing as well from both the school and the parent. I believe that eventually we will find the balance.
Perfect. Baba, thank you so much. To all the parents and carers out there, it's a really tough time, and I wish you the best with whatever decision you make in sending your kids back to school, because it's been a really difficult choice and it's a personal decision as well. Thank you so much, Baba. Is there anything you want to add to this before we end?
Well, it's just to keep encouraging parents, because I know that it's a stressful time and you would be worried about making the perfect decision for your child. You are doing the best that you can, and so keep going and you will eventually find your footing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's been lovely having you on Storytime with Mary again.
Great being here.
I'm really enjoying our conversation. So we will talk again next time.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.